Over the weekend, my fiancé and I stayed in her parents' cabin up in Pikes Peak, Colorado. I made a no-sleep post about it and the disturbing events that transpired over the course of a few nights. Many people have messaged me for an update, but I stopped responding because things have gotten worse since we returned home to California. I feel it's time I say what's going on here. I'm sorry that this is long, but I want to document everything. Faye and I flew back from Colorado on Wednesday afternoon. She slept the entire flight, despite the noise, which amazed me. I can't sleep on planes because I am absolutely terrified of flying. I'd rather stay another night in that cabin. When we got home, I ordered a pizza and she wolfed it down. Her appetite has returned in full force, which is great news. I mentioned this in my original post, but Faye has an undiagnosed sleep disorder. She has pronounced night terrors, sleep talking, and occasional sleepwalking. The disorder lies dormant 90% of the time, but it tends to flare up when she's under a lot of stress. If we're moving, if she's changing jobs, or if a relative dies, I can expect a night of horrifying talking and odd behavior. Needless to say, our experiences at the cabin have set Faye on edge. Although she's in high spirits, she's still afraid at night. I am too. That night, after pizza, she fell asleep on the couch while we watched Wedding Crashers. At around 10 p.m., the movie ended, and I turned the TV off. As I brought our plates to the kitchen, I passed by the stairwell and heard a faint noise from upstairs that sounded like a man sighing. I shrugged it off, woke Faye up, we brushed our teeth and went to bed. Faye talked in her sleep a lot that night. It started around 1 a.m. I woke up to her calling out, "What did you do? Do you need help?" And laughing. This really isn't all that unusual for her. She babbled occasionally, said a few funny things, etc. I woke up again, and around 4, heard her talking. But this time she was doing something she's never done before. Now, we've been together for almost 5 years, and not once has she ever whispered in her sleep. But now, she was whispering with her back turned to me. For a second, I thought someone was lying on the floor, at the edge of the bed, talking back to her. This disturbed the shit out of me, so I sat up and leaned over her, trying to listen in the dark. The only thing I heard her say discernibly was, "Shh." I asked her, "Faye, what are you talking about?" She didn't respond. I said, "Who are you talking to?" She replied, "Don't," and nudged me. Another unusual thing happened at about 5:45 a.m. I woke up to Faye getting back into bed. She hurried into the bedroom from the hall and got back into bed quickly, making zero attempt not to wake me. First of all, Faye does not get up. Ever. She sleeps like a dead horse, and even if she went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, which she never does, the bathroom is not down the hall. It's in our bedroom. When I asked her what she was doing the next morning, she claimed to have no memory of it. I spent all day Thursday thinking about why Faye was still acting weird. I mean, I was the one who found the dream catcher and got close to it. I was the one who interacted with the voices at the cabin. And then I remembered something. On our last night in Colorado, at her parents' house, Faye got back into bed around the same time, 5:45 a.m. I barely remembered because I was half asleep, but the image returned to my head. She'd been getting up really early for a few days. So last night, I set my phone's alarm to vibrate, and I put the time to 5:45 a.m. In the middle of the night, Faye started talking again. This time, she was doing the same thing she did at the cabin, changing her voice to sound like someone else. In 5 years, she sleep-talked a bunch, but has never whispered or changed her voice until recently. She said a few things, which I tried to commit to memory. La, la, la. Shh. He's still in the trees. Where were you? I looked for you. And...
It's time.
About the same time, I heard a noise outside, which sounded like an old man grumbling to himself about something. We live in Norkel, in a really woodsy town, so when you look out the bedroom window, there are tons of trees across the street. It was very dark, but I'm fairly certain I saw a man walking behind the first line of trees. He was too far away to be the one grumbling, but it is very unusual to see anyone over there this time of night. In fact, I have never seen anyone there at night. Ever. Looking outside required me to open the curtains, which lit up our room with moonlight. When I looked back at the bed, Faye was lying there with her neck craned toward me, her eyes crazy wide and fixed on me, and her mouth was open. She issued this really, frighteningly gurgly, drawn-out groan and flicked her tongue around. It looked like an epileptic fit in slow motion. Faye has definitely opened her eyes in her sleep, but never like this. I mean, she looked like a fucking murderer. I got so scared I called her name really loud and woke her up. She was confused, asked me why I was at the window. So I lied, said I was just closing it because it was cold. I didn't want her to know I'd heard a voice. We talked a bit, but I'll skip that because this is getting a little too lengthy. My alarm woke me up at 4:45 a.m., and I laid there awake, waiting for Faye to get up like she had been doing the past few nights. She breathes very rhythmically when she's asleep, so I can always tell how deep she's under. At around 5:20, she sat straight up, swung her legs out of the bed, and tiptoed down the hall. I followed behind. Now, when I say my fiancé tiptoed, I don't mean like a child on Christmas Eve. This was robotic, alien, inhuman. She moved like a meth-addicted ballerina zombie down the hall and stopped at the stairwell. Her breathing never changed. I just stood there in our bedroom, poking my head out into the dark hall. Faye looked down the stairs, still standing rigidly on the balls of her feet, swaying to and fro slightly. She did some weird shit. She touched her face, slowly, for several minutes. Touched the banister, touched the wall, flicked the light on and off a few times, all the while maintaining her perfectly regular coma breathing. Then she reached an arm out in the motion of a bicep curl, stretching her fingers and wriggling them, then curling them, her hand and her arm bringing them back up to her face. I watched her do this motion for about 4 minutes. Looked like she was testing the limb. as if she'd never used it before. But then I realized she was actually communicating with someone on the first floor of the house. She was making a come hither motion. With full confidence that Faye was sleepwalking, I walked into the hall and leaned over the half wall that overlooks the living room. It was totally dark down there. I couldn't see anything but the clock on the cable box. Faye stood there, waving, smiling, making gestures, and then touching her face and pulling gently on her hair. I carefully ushered her back to bed and talked to her softly, trying not to actually wake her. She didn't resist. She never does. And went back to sleep without another word. I have zero clue what the fuck is going on. I told her this morning what she did, and now we have a doctor's appointment for her at 3 p.m. today. I'll keep you guys updated.